So welcome to part 2 of our Impact Capital Showcase series, Catalytic Capital Intermediation, Connecting Mission-Driven Capital to Systemic Change. I'm Sharon Murray, Director of Impact Capital Programs at ReFED, and we are thrilled to co-host this webinar series with our friends at CapShift. As you may have heard from my partner in Impact, Raska Parkey, during the first webinar, ReFED and CapShift have a rich shared history dating back to our founders. So it's been really exciting to work together on this. Each session in the series connects funders and investors with real opportunities to move capital towards impact. And today we're going to look at Catalytic Capital's unique role in unlocking large flows of mission-aligned investment. And as a reminder, our third and final session takes place next Monday. It's focused on bridge financing, and we have great speakers from Open Road Alliance, Enduring Planet, Cold Hubs, and Upcycled Foods, Inc. Your registration for this webinar gets you into that webinar, so you are all set. Just please note that we're going to start 1 hour earlier than the first 2 sessions. Now, let me tell you all a little bit about ourselves and our co-hosts for those a little newer to our organizations. ReFED is a US-based nonprofit working to catalyze action across the food system to stop wasting food. A key part of our work is supporting funders and investors to help deploy capital strategically and confidently into high-impact food waste solutions. We do this through our Food Waste Funder Circle, and it's great to see some of you here today, as well as through tailored advisory support, events like this one, and much more. If you're interested in learning how we can support your giving or investment strategy, would truly welcome you reaching out. And now about our partners. CapShift empowers financial institutions and their clients to activate capital towards social and environmental change. They leverage their impressive technology platform and industry expertise to work with partners at every step. So from discovering impact investment opportunities to portfolio advisory and post-investment reporting. CapShift's clients, which includes 45 private wealth and charitable institutions. And again, thank you to those of you who have joined. All of you together have mobilized over $1 billion of capital to support solutions across 17 UN SDG thematic areas, which is quite impressive. All right, now for the time you've all been waiting for, disclosures. So please take a look at the text on the slide and note that neither CapShift nor ReFED are recommending an investment or recoverable grant to any offering being discussed today, and this conversation is not a recommendation of any products or services from either organization. Okay, with that over with, and we are honored to be joined by leaders who are using catalytic capital to bridge gaps, de-risk innovation, and mobilize large-scale change. First, we'll hear from Claudia Leon, Assistant Director of Impact at Prime Coalition, who will share how funders can leverage philanthropic and PRI dollars to unlock larger flows of private capital into mission-driven companies. Claudia will be followed by pitches from Kathleen Paylor, VP of Impact Investing and Philanthropy at RSF, Isabel Foster, Senior Impact Investing Specialist at WWF Impact, and Jorge Correa, CEO and founder at EatCloud. Thank you all for joining us. Each of them are going to share their unique perspectives and examples of catalytic capital in action. And then we'll bring everyone back for a Q&A, so please do enter those questions in the Q&A box. And with that, Claudia, over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. Well, I am delighted to be here today to speak about the role of catalytic capital in advancing critical climate solutions. And we're so grateful to our partners at CapShift and ReFED for hosting this webinar series. As Sharon mentioned, my name is Claudia Leon. I am an assistant director on the impact team at Prime Coalition. And for those of you who are new to Prime, and as a refresher, for those of you who may know Prime from our work over the past decade, Prime is a US-based nonprofit with a mission to empower philanthropists to advance untapped climate solutions at speed and scale. We have 2 core strategies, catalytic investing and knowledge sharing. And through our catalytic investment strategy, which we'll spend most of the time talking about today, our goal really is to mobilize and deploy charitable capital into market-driven solutions. Our team has been building and implementing catalytic investment programs for over a decade. So our venture our venture capital program, which is Azola Ventures, completed its spin out earlier this year. And then we have our newest program called Trellis Climate, which focuses on first of a kind climate infrastructure finance. So since 2014, Prime has closed 90.8 million of catalytic capital into its nonprofit form. And through our programs, we've also been able to mobilize about just over 310 million into our catalytic investment opportunities. We also like to track what that does for unlocking external funding, and it's a pretty big number, right around 2.2 billion. So I'm excited to talk about the role of catalytic capital today since it's so core to our mission and vision. So next slide. Um, so at a macro level, I think we all understand kind of the scope of the challenge that we're facing that we need to address. Specifically, as the roots of climate change take root, the resources that we need to address climate change and the disparities that it has on human thriving continue to increase. And there's a real opportunity for charitable capital to fill many of these gaps. So next slide. Our team has done some preliminary market sizing on the opportunity for philanthropic capital. And while Prime is really primarily focused on this kind of smallest sliver of where we see catalytic capital for climate, our analysis really signals that over $400 billion of charitable assets could be unlocked for catalytic investing. And we really believe that catalytic capital can play a unique role in meeting many of these unmet capital gaps. So next slide. Primarily, we think that catalytic capital has kind of this potential to crowd in additional co-investors and follow investors. It allows philanthropists to support initiatives that are being overlooked. So really focusing on this principle of additionality, where we think that we can support initiatives that are not being funded, but that could have, achieve impact at a larger scale. And then finally, it allows charitable capital to be recycled and redeployed into additional work. So instead of just giving grant dollars, which don't have recoverability, catalytic investing really allows us to recycle these limited charitable dollars that we have. So in this next slide, we can talk a little bit about kind of how charitable capital moves into climate solutions. So typically, charitable capital kind of typically sits at this top branch where it sits in private foundations and donor-advised funds, with individuals and trusts and family offices, and then in corporate giving programs. These organizations have the ability to deploy that charitable capital in the form of grants, recoverable grants, and in the US specifically through this tool in our tax code that's called, allows us to do program-related investments. That capital can either then move through catalytic capital intermediaries and impact first investment managers, or kind of directly into mission-aligned companies, projects, and solutions. So next slide. As a catalytic capital intermediary, Prime was kind of purpose-built to unlock the flow of catalytic capital into these overlooked climate solutions. And our founder and CEO, Sarah Carney, founded Prime really with the mission of exploring how to leverage catalytic capital, specifically PRIs, to meet kind of the earliest stage innovations that were really critical to meeting climate goals, but which were being overlooked by conventional investors. And our work really tries to focus on substantiating capital gaps that we believe for some reason the capital markets are not filling, and then bringing catalytic capital into those specific acute gaps. So next slide, I think we can just move ahead here. What we've found with kind of our work with philanthropic partners is that catalytic capital intermediaries can really enable philanthropists to activate this capital by addressing some of the key questions that our founder Sarah and others had been kind of identifying and grappling with in the early days of Prime. So we kind of have seen these pervasive high barriers that philanthropists face in deploying their charitable capital. The first one is really focused on kind of this awareness and expertise of what opportunity is. So they need support in identifying, assessing, and prioritizing catalytic capital investments. The second one is on really thinking around impact and additionality. So safeguarding and driving toward impact and additionality goals. both in terms of kind of negotiating for impact first terms at the outset, and then kind of on the ongoing portfolio management, thinking about measurement and management of that impact. And then finally, this piece around charitability and structure. You know, it's very important, but for many philanthropists, they have to prove charitability and maintain charitability. So managing the charitability structures and requirements necessary to deploy that charitable capital. And intermediaries can really help kind of underwrite funds or companies and maintain that mission lock. And then next slide, we see some of the same kind of issues and barriers for catalytic fund managers on the flip side. So on awareness and expertise, they need to, create visibility and tap into connections to charitable asset pools, and then help educate asset owners on the value proposition and opportunity. On impact and additionality, they need kind of support and guidance on how to design and construct and fundraise for catalytic funds and purpose-built vehicles. And then on charitability and structure, for many for-profit companies and funds specifically, it's very difficult to accept charitable capital, and managers need to prove their charitability and make it easier for asset owners to deploy their capital. And, intermediaries can really enable that by, again, supporting with the charitability assessments and with the flow of capital. So next slide. This slide kind of brings it together here of what we see as Prime's role in the ecosystem. We're really eager to continue working with partners to explore how to mobilize catalytic capital flows at a bigger scale. And we really believe that nonprofit intermediation can meaningfully lower barriers on both sides by unblocking kind of those key challenges that both philanthropists and investment managers face. And so as we move into our next 10 years in this next phase of Prime strategy, we're exploring how Prime can leverage our nonprofit structure and catalytic investing expertise from our first 10 years to kind of help unlock additional charitable capital beyond the Prime built programs that we've already built. So in the bottom, you can see that we have kind of Prime built, Prime curated, and Prime facilitated. In 2025, we've been piloting a new kind of model to partner with investment managers that meet our eligibility criteria, and to provide philanthropists kind of with an easy nonprofit pathway to support those opportunities with grants or recoverable grants. And again, for these opportunities, as with all of Prime's catalytic investing programs, we kind of aggregate the charitable capital from many different types of philanthropists. So donor advised funds, private foundations, family offices, and we use those aggregated commitments to make investments into the eligible catalytic investment opportunities. And then the final piece, to this next slide, is that we're really excited to kind of expand our internal capital orchestration capacity by beginning to market test a curated platform in 2026, where we'll be sourcing funds that really allow us to achieve our impact priorities that are based on this in-house systems research that we've been conducting. So over the last 18 months, we've been kind of thinking about how to develop more in-depth knowledge around the systemic interventions needed to drive transformational impact in these high priority systems. And in the first phase of our work, we really focused kind of on a top-down data exercise of identifying the critical systems and geographies that are needed for climate action worldwide. And we really focused on where climate change mitigation, climate adaptation, and disparities in human thriving intersect the most strongly. So I'm highlighting here an example that we came to in our research, which is focused on food systems in Latin America. And you can see we've kind of identified the key thesis of how this shows up across all three of our climate objectives. And right now we're in phase 2, where we're working with partners and backbone organizations who are really experts in these systems to help us learn and inform and guide kind of our programmatic strategies. So as we look to 2026, as we build out our Prime curated and Prime facilitated platform, we're really excited to work with managers and partners like ReFED and like you'll hear from WWF Impact, but they're already kind of in conversation with us to think about how we might expand our catalytic investment strategy into those new areas. So maybe I'll close out there, and just my call to action is that if you're excited about learning more and joining Prime in our next phase, please reach out. We're always excited to see how we can partner with both philanthropists and investment managers to kind of reach new markets. So with that, I'm excited to hand it over to Kathleen Kathleen Paler from RSF.
Great, thanks. Let me share my screen here. Can everyone see that? And hear me? Sharon, I'm actually going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to share my screen.
Oh, I can see
I mean,
it.
not share my screen, but I can't see my notes, which
Got it. Yes, happy
would
to do
be
that.
so. Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I'm gonna stop sharing and just let you share, and let you drive if you don't mind. Thanks. And apologies in advance that I am at SFO, the San Francisco airport. So hopefully there's not too much interference, but let's see, let me get this down here. Great. Well, thanks. Thanks everybody for joining today, and thanks to the team at CapShift and ReFED for hosting us today. I'm Kathleen Paler, the VP of Impact Investing and Philanthropy at RSF, Regenerative Social Finance. Next slide. RSF's mission is to change finance and finance change. We've been around for about 40 years and are sort of, I like to say, the OG of impact investing. In those 40 plus years, we've mobilized over $1 billion towards impact. We provide affordable, flexible, relationship-based capital to social entrepreneurs who likely wouldn't be able to get financing from mainstream banks, not because they're risky. We have a very rigorous credit policy and underwriting process, but because they're too small or too complex, usually, for banks to be interested in spending the time to invest in them. We have 5 principles that undergird all the work that we do. And these are all part of the changing finance aspect of our work, because these aren't principles that you often see embodied in mainstream finance. Sorry, next slide. You'd gone to the next slide. So now onto the next slide, slide 4. Our main vehicle for impact and the way that we finance change is through our loan fund. We have 4 sectors: climate, community impact, climate and energy, community impact, food and ag, and education. Food and ag includes food waste, natural products, regenerative agriculture, food distribution. Climate and energy can include solar, alternative materials, recycling, energy efficiency. Education tends to be buildings, so that schools can own the buildings that they operate in. And community impact is a bit of a catch-all, can include housing, healthcare, arts and culture, workforce development. As you can see, portfolio size is around 140 million. We have currently 55 active borrowers. Our loan size tends to be in the 500,000 to 5 million. With some borrowers, we have 2 facilities. We'll have up to 10 or 12 million with a few borrowers. We provide senior secured debt, and we loan out at a rate. We determine internally RSF prime, and then our loan rates start at prime plus 1. And our current average historical rate is about 6.5%. Go to the next slide. One of our favorite borrowers, I mean, they're all favorite, but one of my favorite borrowers, I don't know if folks know Gooder. If anybody listens to the podcast, How I Built This by Guy Raz, there's a great interview with Jasmine Crowe Houston, who is the founder. Their tagline, Gooder's tagline, is feed more, waste less. And I love this Forbes magazine article title, How One Atlanta Startup Solved the Biggest Problem in Food Waste Recovery. And what Gooder does is just brilliant. They leverage technology and logistics to divert excess food from large grocery stores, airports, convention centers, large corporations. She works with Nike, Oracle, Cisco, and a lot of others at that size and scale. And then they connect their food that they aren't using to organizations who are feeding the hungry. And they've really brilliantly married at scale the adjacent but not often directly connected problems of food waste and hunger. And they've done it through a blockchain-enabled tech platform. It's really a remarkable story. So I would definitely encourage you to look into Gooder if you're not familiar with it. Jasmine just was initially feeding people herself in Atlanta and buying the flowers and the food and the tablecloths and everything herself, and started to look into how she might get some help paying for this. And as the more research she did, she discovered the scale of the problem, and decided to start Gooder. And another thing that I really like about this borrower for us is that while I mentioned in the earlier slide that we just provide senior secured debt, we also have an $8 million pool of philanthropic capital, which we call a catalytic impact pool. And we use that when we come across borrowers who have a fantastic and strong credit, you know, they have a strong credit profile, and they have an amazing impact story. And we will, but they're asset light. And in those cases, we will collateralize the loans ourselves. So we did that for a part of the loan with Jasmine, which was the only way we could have funded her. And we really didn't want to pass up that opportunity. So the bulk of the loan to her, we have guaranteed ourselves. Can go on to the next slide, Sharon. This is just a quote from Jasmine. We're really proud of this investment with her and our partnership, and the fact that we could take this blended catalytic capital stack to make it happen. Next slide. And so the way that these loans get funded are primarily through the Social Investment Fund, but there are 3 ways that capital comes into RSF. And part of the way that we change finance is by empowering people to deploy capital in ways that align with their values. So the loan fund is funded by investors who purchase notes. We also have a Catalyst Fund, which is a philanthropic vehicle for people who want to support the loan fund, but through philanthropy. And then we also offer a DEF program. You can go on to the next slide, Sharon. In terms of the Social Investment Fund, which is really the main vehicle that funds our loan fund, we trademarked the term this year, fixed income for good, mostly because I got tired of saying sort of apologetically that our rates were concessionary, and really just started framing them as competitively priced fixed income instruments. Because our 3-year note is just 8 basis points below Treasury bills and provides, at least I would argue, a lot more impact. So we have 3 different tenors of notes, 3 different rates. We also do custom notes, and we've recently been able to develop a broker note channel so that advisors who had been really wanting to invest in RSF but couldn't just do so on a platform can do that much more easily. The other thing I think that's important to lift up is, much like with our borrowers who we have a relationship-based approach with, and really are with our borrowers for the long term, knowing that they'll have peaks and valleys with their business. We also do this with our investors. We have over about 1,250 investors. I can't say that we know them each personally, but we really do try to have a personal relationship and get to know all of our investors, and also have our investors get to know our borrowers by hosting community gatherings where they can interface and learn about each other. Borrowers can ask questions of our investors and vice versa. So that's a little bit about both the what, the fund, and then the how we do it, the relationship-based approach to that. Next slide. Then the Catalyst Fund, which we're just in the process of launching. The Catalyst Fund leverages philanthropic dollars to unlock impact investing. So like every lender, we have to have what are called loan loss reserves on our balance sheet to cover any potential losses. In our case, that's 2.5%. And so, for example, if someone were to be excited by this call today and invest $40 million in RSF tomorrow, we couldn't loan that $40 million out unless we had a ballast of $1 million in our loan loss reserves to do that. And that's what the Catalyst Fund provides, is that, I call it sort of that foundational soil that will provide us the ability to loan out. So for every dollar we loan out, because of that 2.5%, for every dollar that comes into the Catalyst Fund, we can loan out $40. So, and that was really, we're just really getting that off the ground, but it's exciting because it allows, a lot of times philanthropists were really interested in the value proposition of RSF, but didn't have a vehicle to invest directly in the social investment fund. And this provides that additional opportunity for them to invest in the social investment fund. Next slide. And then we also have a DAF. It's a very small DAF, as DAFs go in this world, and it's never been really our core business. But there are a couple of ways that we try to punch above our weight when it comes to how we structure things. The first is, we call it a double impact vehicle. And that is that DAF holders can invest any passive capital that they're not granting out into the social investment fund and have what we call a double impact, both in terms of investing and philanthropy, while they're not using that capital. And the second is something that we launched just this past year called the DAF Mobilization Project. And that was an effort to mobilize some of the billions and billions of passive DAF capital that's sitting on the sidelines and really not doing much but earning fees. And we offered anyone opening a new DAF at RSF the opportunity to have all fees waived on whatever portion of their DAF they moved into the social investment fund. So those are the three: the social investment fund, the Catalyst Fund, and then the DAF. Those are the three ways that folks can move capital into RSF. And we can go to the next slide, which is slide 11. And this is really just the last slide. And I wanted to close on this because I think it does just a good job of communicating not just what we do at RSF, but who we are and the spirit that has guided our work since 1984. And so I hope this has given you a sense of how RSF works to both change finance and finance change. And reach out. We'd love to include you in our network of stakeholders on the borrower side, on the investor side, and on the philanthropist side. And with that, I will turn it over to Isabel to talk about the work they're doing at WWF.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I'm now just going to share my screen. Can everyone see? Sharing. Okay, perfect. Hopefully everyone can see that. But just wanted to start by saying a big thank you to ReFED and CapShift for the opportunity to participate in this conversation today. Great to see the high turnout, and really looking forward to this. So as a quick introduction, again, my name is Isabel Foster. I'm a senior impact investing specialist at the World Wildlife Fund, specifically on our impact investing team, WWF Impact. So as we know, climate crisis, biodiversity crisis is a significant challenge in 2025, and there are opportunities to try to leverage nature-based solutions, think about ecosystems and food systems for really trying to help with decarbonization and supporting more healthy ecosystems and also communities. And so World Wildlife Fund, for those who might not be familiar, is a global nonprofit. We operate in over 100 countries and are really focused on trying to conserve nature and biodiversity and support the communities and people that live in these ecosystems. We've launched an arm called WWF Impact, which is the team that I'm on, and we're really trying to bring private catalytic capital to be able to accelerate our conservation goals as a nonprofit. One of the first areas that we're really focused on and starting to make investments in is in the food system. As many of you joining the call probably know, food loss and waste is a tremendous source of GHG emissions. It has significant consequences for ecosystems, for communities. And so we're trying to see if through our impact investing approach, we can really try to help reduce some of the over 40% of food that's produced globally that's lost or wasted. We know that despite awareness, increasing awareness of this topic, there still are not sufficient solutions or infrastructure changes for being able to reduce the amount of food that's lost or wasted. Less than 2% of nutrients from food are recycled in cities, showing that there's significant opportunity for really trying to drive innovative solutions in this space. The World Wildlife Fund has a robust amount of programmatic work historically, and our impact investing work is really trying to take this programmatic work to the next level and support these market-based solutions that can help drive change. And so we've created our impact and investment thesis, really building off the programmatic goals and insights that we have as an organization. One of which being how do we really measure and reduce food waste from entering landfills? Also trying to think about how do we support policy and initiatives and coalitions for reducing food loss and waste globally. And then thirdly, where impact investing really comes in, how do we build a profitable marketplace for supporting food and nutrient circularity globally? So this brings us to our impact investing work. And at WF, we've launched a new impact investing arm, really trying to bring that private capital to amplify and accelerate our conservation goals as an organization. The way we're doing this is we're making equity investments into early stage companies. So our ticket size is about $200,000 up to $800,000, and really looking at innovations in the pre-seed to Series A stage that have a proof of concept or in the market, but are really looking for that impact-oriented capital to be able to grow and scale their social and environmental impact. We're deploying capital as equity or a convertible note. And given that we're a nonprofit, we have a somewhat unique structure in deploying catalytic capital. We're actually bringing in philanthropic capital to our fund as WF Impact. Our core partners are philanthropic donors that provide capital as either a grant or a recoverable grant. With that capital, we're deploying the money as an equity investment into our portfolios, which I'll talk about in a moment. And this allows us to be really impact oriented, to invest into spaces that are typically overlooked. And as we get a return and make an exit from our investments, we recover 1x the capital to the donor. And then any additional proceeds we get, any profit from the investment, we're reinvesting that as an evergreen fund model. Really trying to just deploy more capital and continue to make more investments and support more companies in this space. The three areas where we're currently investing are all in the food space. We have one in the regenerative agriculture space, one in the circularity or food circularity space, and then one in the low trophic aquaculture space. And to date, we've invested into 7 companies across the 3 portfolios. So we're still building and scaling this new catalytic arm of the organization. We've invested about $5 million across the 3 portfolios, and all of these portfolios have a very clear impact and investment thesis that's born out of the insights of our programmatic team, the on-the-ground consultations with community partners in the different geographies where we work. So our food circularity portfolio, which is the strategy that I lead, is really trying to target some of the capital gaps that we're seeing in the food loss and waste space. We're seeing that, and thanks to the great data from the ReFED capital tracker, we're seeing that a large amount of the capital that does go to food loss and waste is mostly going to large-scale investments. Over 75% of the capital deployed between 2014 to 2024 goes to investments over $25 million. So there's less capital that's going to early stage innovations, which are generally locally led, locally based solutions, early stage companies that are coming up with innovative models that we really want to see grow and scale because they have such potential, but oftentimes it's harder for that early stage catalytic capital to reach them. We're also seeing that just globally in the venture capital market, there's disproportionately less capital that goes to certain regions. One of the regions that we're really focused on is Latin America and the Caribbean. So In 2022, only 3.75% of the capital in the agri-food tech investment space for venture capital went to Latin America and the Caribbean, which is a space that we're really keenly focused on. So our investment thesis in our food circularity portfolio is really trying to think about how do we prevent food loss and waste from happening? How do we valorize wasted food and really recycle nutrients, keep them in the food system, and try to support local food security, food sovereignty, and access to healthy food while diverting organic material from landfills where it generates CO2 and GHG emissions? As mentioned earlier, we have a strong focus on the Americas, in particular Latin America and the Caribbean. And so we've done in-depth consultation, mapping to really understand what are the most germane business models and innovation types that can help address some of the food loss and waste and circularity challenges per different geography. So one of the companies that we're really excited by that's in our portfolio is EatCloud. We're thrilled to have Jorge Correa, co-founder and CEO, present right after me. So excited to have Jorge be able to dive into the great work that the team's doing. But this is an example of one of our portfolio companies and way in which we're excited to be able to deploy this early stage catalytic capital to be able to have tangible real world impacts in local communities and local ecosystems around the world. And so as we look forward, eCloud's an example of why we're passionate about this work. We're really looking to scale, reach more startups, support more early stage companies and entrepreneurs in bringing their solutions to light. And so we are always looking for other like-minded partners who are interested in deploying early stage catalytic capital. We have a base of philanthropic partners who provided some of that really critical philanthropic funding, either as a grant or a recoverable grant, to launch our portfolios. And so we are always looking to talk with other partners who might be willing to help support this work, whether it's from a foundation side, from an individual giving side, from like-minded co-investors, always looking to talk with individuals to think about how can we scale some of our existing portfolios, such as in the food circularity space, as well as partner with other groups who might want to co-launch a strategy together, for example, in a different area such as forest or a certain part of the food loss and waste space. So always looking to talk with partners. And with that, just wanted to close and say a big thank you again for the opportunity to present and share a little bit more on what WWF Impact is doing in this space. And just a big thank you to everyone joining and all of those working in the catalytic early stage space, as well as the food loss and waste space. So with that, I will say thank you, and I will pass over the presentation to Jorge from EatCloud.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Let me share my screen. Can you see my logo?
Sure can.
Perfect. Hi all. I'm Jorge, CEO of EatCloud, and it's a pleasure to meet here with you today. Thank you so much for inviting me. 20 years ago, our founding team launched the first Colombian company to develop mobile apps and automate real-time commercial operations in top CPGs. And helping our clients keep their channels full of food, we saw how, when, and why thousands of tons of unsold food were being removed from the inventory at points of sales, distribution centers, and production plants countrywide, evidencing two pain points: the logistic cost of shrinkage and the operational cost of inventory write-off, and the reputational risk of wasting edible food while 1 in 8 people is go to bed hungry, generating greenhouse gases when the world is facing dramatic climate changes. Finally, we understood that unsold food can represent a high cost and risk, or a great opportunity, and the difference between both scenarios is one word that changes everything: data. And to provide traceability and measure the enormous impact of circularizing unsold food and support food banks and social ecosystems in the fights against hunger, we have created EatCloud, turning this problem into an opportunity. EatCloud is a digital platform powered by AI and analytics that connects supply and demand for unsold food without touching the food, without regulatory friction, acting as a bridge between the food ecosystem and the surpluses revaluation ecosystems. Our model reduces the food waste, saves on logistic cost, generates tax benefits, support the food industry compliance through real-time data, and enables them to achieve an unprecedented social and environmental impact. With a clear commitment to combating hunger, we are prioritizing the redistribution of edible food for human consumption, connecting food banks and charities, playing a key role in the food security landscape. EatCloud redistributes food surpluses for multiple uses, leading the food industry toward a zero-waste future. Grupo Éxito, the Colombian retail leader, adopted our solution in 2020. Since then, they have expanded their scope of food waste management process through donations, increasing contribution to food banks, and by understanding the EatCloud data, they reduced their average monthly shrinkage from 217 tons to 68 tons. And it is the economic impact that our model generates in the industry that makes possible a business model based on software as a service and data analytics. We are charging a monthly license according to the service level agreement for each point of sale, distribution center, and production plants connected to our platform. That's what we call each point of surplus food management. And we also monetize our analytic data segmented by interest. The data focuses on operational, social, economic, and environmental impact. More than 250 KPIs aligned with the SDGs, GRI, and SESB standards, and the money is calculated per connected point based on the client's choosing data segmentation. As a result, an impactful model validating for the industry in Colombia, Mexico, and Ecuador that helps clients like this become the change makers the world needs. A model that will soon help a lot of companies to consolidate their global surplus food management operation into a single powerful dashboard. EatCloud is a strategic ally to food banks and charities, helping them attract new donors and retain existing ones. We provide them with cutting-edge technology to ensure complete traceability of the donation process and automate their micro-logistic routes, enable them to rescue small, medium, and large volumes of unsold food, expanding their reach and amplifying their impact. And right now, we are joining forces with local governments' food security strategies through the Zero Hunger Medellin's Alliance, the Medellin's Mayor's Food Security Strategy. We connect our surplus redistribution ecosystem and establish capacities within the city to combat hunger. With the Catalytic social investment, they could have purchased 78,000 meals. Today, we have redistributed the equivalent of more than 3 million meals, reaching the most vulnerable people through food banks. Now, we are prepared to advance to the next level. We are a globally focused startup awarded by organizations such as Microsoft, Google, SAP, KPMG, Deloitte, and the World Food Program, among others. A globally validated platform benchmark of the best practices in sustainable development from UN Habitat. A validated business model growing 5x in the last year with zero churns since 2020 in the data client segment. A company with great potential for growth in its current clients' portfolio. A scale-up with significant potential for global expansion, currently operating in Colombia, Mexico, and Ecuador, developing pilot projects in Central America, North America, Europe, and Africa. To accelerate our go-to-market strategy, we had partnered with global organizations and are joining forces with local governments. And our goal is to expand our ecosystem to reach 50 countries within the next 5 years. Right now, we are preparing our Series A, which will be launched in 2026, focusing on expanding into 10 countries. Meanwhile, we are operating a bridge using Mala said countries. So far, we have redistributed almost 50,000 tons of unsold food, equivalent to more than 110 million meals, saving the food industry more than $40 million. 110 million meals that right now are showing the world that by using exponential technologies to redistribute unsold food wasted today, we can help companies become more efficient, and with them, we can eradicate the hunger of tomorrow. Thank you so much. And Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jorge. We are now going to move on to Q&A. So if everyone wants to come back and join me. Wonderful. All right, we are going to start with an easy one. This is for Claudia and for Kathleen as the other folks address this. If you can speak to the geographic coverage or focus area for your organizations.
Yeah, for RSF, we loan in the US only, a little bit in Canada, but it's 99% US based, and within that, we're agnostic. We're all over the US.
And for Prime, our work to date has been focused on North America, but as we think about this platform expansion, we're really being guided by our systems research, which, as I highlighted, has a true focus on the impacts that we can have in primarily the global South. So we're thinking about Latin America, South and Southeast Asia, and Africa as areas of expansion.
Great. All right, Kathleen, we've got two questions for you that are interconnected. So the first is wondering how Gooder gets its money to repay the loan. And a related question is why structure that capital as a loan versus a grant or donation. Maybe I'll add in because this comes up a lot versus a recoverable grant. And what are the benefits to both RSF and Gooder from that type of a structure?
Yeah. So they repay the loan through their business, through their earned revenue. I mean, they have an amazing and robust revenue stream, which is part of why they were such a good credit risk and really could easily go through our underwriting process, with the exception of the lack of assets to secure a loan. So they have clear means to repay the loan. In terms of why a loan and not a grant, RSF does not make grants. We facilitate grants through our DAF, but we don't make any grants or recoverable grants of any sort. But great question.
Maybe I'll answer this a little bit from some of the perspectives we see, which is while recoverable grants and loans have some similarities, especially if you structure a zero interest loan, recoverable grants have some simpler structuring, especially for philanthropic funders. So that is a benefit. On the other hand, some investors, right, have pretty rigid asset classes that they invest in, and loans are more comfortable and fit into an asset class and have more legal recourse for getting that money back. So we can feel free to reach out to me or others here if you want to talk in more detail, but there can be pros and cons to both structures, even though they can seem quite similar. The next question I'll ask is for anyone who wants to answer. Have any of you worked with community foundations as clients in this work?
I can say from the Prime side, we have worked with community foundations that have participated in Prime built programs, specifically in Azola Ventures Fund 1. And we're always thinking about how to partner with community foundations to further unlock charitable giving. So always happy to have more conversations about that.
Yeah, and I would say too, we've explored it and found it to be a little bit challenging. I mean, we've mostly explored it in terms of trying to unlock DAF capital that's held at community foundations for investments. And that's proved to be a little bit of a challenge. And also, our loan fund is blended and if community foundations will often want just area specific, which we don't have the ability to carve out and say, this money will just go to California or Kansas City or, whatever it is. So there's been a couple of challenges, but we're always looking for the opportunity to, how can we, particularly on the DAF side of things, access some of that capital for impact.
Great. And this is a question that Isabel answered in the chat, but I think it's a really good question and interesting response. So I'll just verbalize it here, which is, what are the expectations in terms of return and impact for the funders in the WWF Impact Fund? Is that money coming from funders' philanthropic portfolios or elsewhere? And how is that categorized, which is, always critical for the asset owners and quite complex in this space?
Yeah, happy to give a quick recap on that. Thanks, Sharon, and thanks for the question. From the WWF impact side, so we're actually, in terms of the capital flow, we're receiving recoverable grants and grants ourselves to WWF Impact. We then deploy that as equity. So on our balance sheet, we're making equity investments. The vision is that since we don't have an LPGP model, we're actually able to be very impact focused and kind of prioritize impact when we make our investments and have a little bit longer time horizons than a typical LPGP structure in a venture capital fund. And then the vision is that this philanthropic capital, and when we get it, it helps really seed and launch a portfolio. And so the vision is that we're trying to launch these evergreen fund models and portfolios. So as we get an exit from our investments, the vision is we would repay 1x to the donor, the recoverable grant, and then reinvest additional proceeds into an evergreen fund model so we can support more companies and really try to have a broader impact. So that's how our model is structured, slightly non-traditional, but that's how we've been trying to launch this from the nonprofit perspective. And then specifically on the impact metrics piece, we do have a long list of metrics that we track per portfolio and also have specific kind of investment theses and theories of change for each of our investments that we build with our programmatic teams as well. So happy to follow up with folks afterwards if there are questions on kind of impact metrics and things of that nature. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. While these questions are fascinating, I'm going to have to cut us off because we're nearing the end of the webinar. So I'm going to just reshare my screen here and close us out. Thank you so much, Claudia, Kathleen, Isabel, and Jorge. I am unbiased, fully and completely convinced by the value proposition that you all showed today. So thank you for sharing that with our audience. Before I fully close this out with everything fresh in the audience's mind, we would love if you just take a minute to give us some feedback via a poll that's going to pop up momentarily. And to make this musical, I'm going to share some music for us, a little bit of Queen while you fill that out. All right. Hopefully that made filling out the poll a little more fun. And feel free to finish up for those still thinking about their responses. Just as a reminder again to everyone, you're going to receive the webinar recording, slide decks, speaker contact info after the webinar. So please continue the conversation, explore collaboration opportunities, a lot of really great potential for impact here. We're also going to host a roundtable discussion with Claudia. Thank you, Claudia, for funders who want to really just dive deeper on some of the mechanics and some of those intricacies of how to deploy catalytic capital, because we know that it is complicated, and we'll share details on how to sign up for that. So please keep an eye out. And don't forget, mark your calendars. We've got the third and last webinar in our series on bridge financing coming up next week, 12 to 1 ET. And finally, please feel free to follow up with ReFED and CapShift using the information on the slide. We'd truly be happy and honored to support any additional learnings, share more opportunities with you all. Thank you again so much for joining, and have a great rest of the week.